Several mosques have been destroyed in China's far western region of Xinjiang.
Remember, reports about what's going on in the Xinjiang province in western China have included counts of rape, forced sterilization, torture, over 1 million people in, quote, re-education camps, as the Chinese call them.
An independent panel made up of legal experts and academics found that hundreds of thousands of Uyghurs had been incarcerated in China, backing up US assertions that Chinese policies were genocidal.
My sister is still missing. I still don't know any information of her. She's being hostage taken by this government.
Of admiration I actually have for China, because their basic dictatorship is allowing them to actually turn their economy around on a dime and say, we need to go green as fast as we need to start, investing in solar.
A Canadian Senate bill could impose a complete ban on goods imported from the Xinjiang region of China over concerns of forced labor and genocide. Conservative Senator Leo Housakos, who introduced the bill, is frustrated with what he says is the ineffectiveness of existing laws. At least one container involving goods connected to slave labor in the Xinjiang region has been seized. So far, the Canadian government has committed to banning goods connected to slave labor. The US has done the same. However, Housakos has said a total Xinjiang ban would make the job easier for border agency officials who screen millions of products each year. Although Canadian Parliament has recognized the genocide is taking place in China, the governing Liberal Party under Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was largely absent from that vote.
The reason why I abstained is, as someone who has practiced international law, has done international litigation, it was quite obvious to me that the facts that have emerged are unconscionable, they're egregious, but they do not fit the precise definition of genocide. Had the Conservatives decided to say that these were crimes against humanity, absolutely would have voted.
The Subcommittee on International Human Rights spent 2 full days of hearings in July of last year. We heard from many experts and scholars, including former Liberal Justice Minister Irwin Cotler, including luminaries in terms of human rights like David Kilgour, and directly we heard from many survivors. They testified to systemic sexual violence, forced abortion, forced insertion of IUDs, forced sterilization as part of a campaign to dramatically drop birth rates among Uyghurs. Now that conforms to the text of the UN Convention on Genocide, which criteria D of which is efforts to prevent births within the group as part of a campaign to eliminate a population in whole or in part. That is the legal definition.
In 2019, Prime Minister Trudeau said Canada had committed a genocide after the report on missing and murdered Indigenous women. He said the words, "Canada committed a genocide. We accept the findings, including what happened, that amounts to genocide." So Canada has committed a genocide, you're saying, as a Liberal, and you're saying China against the Uyghurs, the evidence you've seen there does not rise to that level. You're saying that?
Well, first of all, let me say, Evan, that there is a very robust debate that is going on amongst scholars and people who understand international law. And there is absolutely no consensus at this part that what we have seen emerge, although it has been horrific, it has been terrible, and it should be condemned.
I'm joined now by Minister Yang Guang, Charge d'Affaires at the Chinese Embassy in London. Thank you for joining us. Are you really surprised by these sanctions? You've had 2 successive US administrations accusing you of genocidal acts in Xinjiang. So are you really surprised by sanctions?
Well, thank you, Mark, for having me. I'm not surprised by the decision of the British government, but I feel disappointed and I strongly opposed to this move because this is a totally wrong decision. First, there's no so-called genocide or forced labor or mass sterilization or other things. We call it the lies of the century. The accusation against us in Xinjiang is totally groundless and not based on facts. Secondly, sanction, especially unilateral sanction, violates the international law and the basic norms governing international relations. So we're opposed to these kind of sanctions. Third, sanction will be useless to China. You know, it will only reunite the Chinese people. And the basic response I heard is that the officials feel honored to be sanctioned by the US, EU, or other countries because they have successfully safeguarded national sovereignty, security, and development interests.
Okay, let me ask you a question then. What do you call then the forcing of men, women, and children into concentration camps? Because that's what the US Secretary of State says. He says that you're re-educating incarcerated Uyghurs into the ideology of the Communist Party. And that speaks, he said, and I quote, to an effort to commit genocide.
There is no such a thing of genocide. Genocide is more accurate for the United States.
With a new agreement reached between the Liberal Party and the New Democrat Party under Jagmeet Singh, what could future relations between Canada and China look like? The NDP voted in favor of calling the treatment of Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang a genocide. Will they stick to their guns?
The vote that the ministers and that the prime minister didn't attend was a statement. It was a statement that said, we need to start down this path of deciding, you know, if this is a genocide, we need to have a United Nations investigation. We need to have this declared. We need to bring our allies on board. We need to start looking at a whole range of things that we can do at that point. But the government didn't show up. They didn't do the vote. They're hiding from actually declaring that what is happening is a genocide. And I sat on that Human Rights Commission. I was in the International Human Rights Subcommittee when we listened to that testimony. And I can tell you, we listened to experts, we listened to victims, we listened to a number of people. And to say now that you don't think that it has met the definition of genocide is absurd.
Canada-China relations have obviously been strained, especially since the arrest of Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou and the retaliatory arrests of Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig, who've now been released. The involvement of Huawei in the rolling out of 5G technology in Canada is also an ongoing and contentious issue. Could the Chinese Communist Party use the 5G tech as a backdoor to spy on the country? As for the Xinjiang Manufactured Goods Importation Prohibition Act, it's currently in second reading in the Senate. It's a story I'll be keeping an eye on, along with some alarming developments in the Solomon Islands near Australia involving China. Some politicians in election mode have been beating the war drums. Click and subscribe and check out that video as we dig into what's going on.